Hi, everyone, and welcome to Living Connected. I am delighted, over the moon to introduce you to Dr. Angela Fitch. She's blushing a little bit, but I'm a big Dr. Fitch fan. So I think, Angela, you were my chief resident when I was an intern. Just what?
Now you're making me feel
No, that was
old,
like
but
5 years ago. It's all very
yeah,
recent.
exactly,
It's
exactly,
all very recent.
exactly, exactly.
But Dr. Fitch is a nationally renowned obesity expert, one of the smartest doctors I know in the industry, and actually what I would call a real doctor. So I don't know if you can see behind her, she actually has an otoscope, an ophthalmoscope. I don't know. What do you do with that stuff, Angela?
Well, here at so I've started this new clinic, as you know, called
Yeah.
Knownwell, and we do primary care and obesity medicine together in one patient-centered medical home for people with obesity. So we do primary care, so we have to have all the tools to look in your eyes, look in your
Yep.
ears, because sometimes you have an earache.
Yeah, it's so funny. So this morning I was on LinkedIn and there was some back and forth going on about what's broken and diabetes and all the technology. And
Yes, I
my
saw
whole
that.
point is we're missing the basics. I don't know how many clinicians even know how to do a proper fundoscopic
Oh, it's
exam, which
fun.
is, by the way, using that widget behind Angela that you use to look
Right.
in the eye. How many people get trained to do that properly? I feel like we're going straight to the gadgets and gizmos and we forget the basics.
I know, and even then, just being able to utilize technology, I think, especially in the diabetes and obesity space, as you were mentioning, we have so much new technology today that especially around body composition, for
Yeah,
example, that we're not
right.
using, and it's
And we
weird
default to
that people. I mean, I
BMI,
think.
which so
Yes, but
archaic.
and we have these machines now that can measure how much body fat you have, and so that's sometimes challenging as a patient to look at that number or to process that number. But at the same time, that's what we're really trying to change is, the degree of our adiposity, we call it, right, which is the amount of body fat that we have, because that's what makes us sick.
Right.
It causes inflammation, leads to metabolic syndrome and diabetes and heart disease and Alzheimer's and all these other diseases that affect us over our lifespan. So I think, we need to just start measuring it, which we can do now
Yeah.
today. And it's weird, it's the bias and stigma, to be honest, against the disease state, this idea that you should just eat less and
Can we
exercise
talk
more,
about that, the
you know.
bias and the stigma? So I forget which episode. I don't know if it was South Park or something else that I was watching, but the quote that I walked away from, and I might butcher this, was rich people get Ozempic, poor people get body positivity. So can we just
Yes,
talk about that? Because that really, there's
yes.
some truth to that. I don't know. How are you thinking about this anti-diet movement,
Yeah.
health, body positive, all of it? What do you think?
Well, it's true though, meaning we all should have body
Of
positivity,
course.
meaning, the fact that we have this diet culture that's developed over centuries, right? I mean, there's data to show that one of our Hippocrates, the first doctor in the world back in 500
The
BC, which is
OG,
before
the OG
Christ.
doctor.
Yeah, the OG. Yeah, before Christ, not before COVID, but before Christ. There's BC and then there's BC now. So you have to clarify. I'm talking old, right? I'm talking older than us. Chief resident back in the days of the tablets. They were carving prescriptions, in the
If you
tablet.
dropped a
But
tablet, you had to
there's
start all over again. You're like, whoops.
yes, so much for the EMR. but but no, back then he said, right, there's quotes of him saying, to treat obesity you just need to eat less and exercise more, or he used even worse words like, sloth and gluttony, right? You need to not be slothful and not be gluttonous, right? And again, that has perpetuated our healthcare system since 500 BC. So we're fighting against this diet culture idea that if you just diet, right, if you just eat better, you will be able to control your body weight. And what we know today from science that's developed over the past, definitely over the past 20 years, right? The science. And we know science takes a long
Yeah.
time, to develop and then become sort of entrenched as as what we know. But we know now that it's not just about what you eat and how you exercise, that's part of it, just like other diseases, that our lifestyle factors play a role. Whether you smoke or not, can predispose you to lung cancer, but there's other factors too. People get lung cancer that never smoked,
Right.
right? So again, these are diseases that we get, and obesity is one of them, right? And so we have to recognize that and then use whatever tools we have available to us in order to treat that disease. Versus, I think the diet culture, this idea of just eat less, exercise more, is what sort of pushed people into this body positivity movement. And again, not that we should be positive about our bodies, but it's like almost like people are going the other way over to the other side because they're like, so again, fighting back against the diet culture,
Yeah.
right? They can't fight back anymore because they've been fighting for years, but they also haven't had a treatment for their disease, because what's been offered to them has been something that doesn't
Right.
work. I mean, we have data to show that, in good randomized controlled trials where people are, provided a lifestyle intervention, and they follow up with a dietitian, with a health coach, with a trainer, every week, and they're doing these positive lifestyle behaviors, that about 10% of people are able to lose 20% of their weight in doing so. And that's just the reality of the treatment. That's not because 90% of the people did it
Right.
wrong. It's because that's how good the treatment is. It's not very good. Lifestyle intervention for treating obesity, once you get obesity, right, is just not good
Yeah.
enough. Just like lifestyle intervention for hypertension isn't good enough
Right.
either. But thankfully, we developed antihypertensives, and now people don't
Right.
have to have, not as many people have to have
But we don't
dialysis,
shame
right?
people
Because
in taking
no, for their hypertension,
antihypertensive medications
right?
or
And they don't
anti-cholesterol
run around
medications,
saying,
right?
right, and they don't run around saying, don't take my blood
Right.
pressure because I'm stigmatized by it. No, I mean, but now we're getting to the point where people are saying, don't check my weight. Well, that's a bad
Right.
situation, because if we don't check your weight, we can't tell if things are getting worse or better. We also shouldn't shame you about your weight. We also, might not need to do it on a scale that also makes you feel bad because you're standing on a device, like that that act of doing that sometimes is also kind of stigmatizing, right? I mean, we have now in our clinic where we have exam tables that weigh you because we have that technology. I mean, you can just sit in the exam table and it gets your weight. So you don't have to stand on the scale if that's been traumatizing to you. Because if you can imagine being someone that's had obesity since they were 14 and now they're 54,
Yeah.
for 40 years, they've been coming in and getting on a machine every year. And that machine keeps telling them they're a failure. They're a failure because they go into the doctor. The doctor says, well, if you just did a little bit better, right? Just ate a little bit better, exercise a little bit more, you wouldn't have this disease. And they try that. They go home, they do that. They come back, they get on the same device. The device says, you
Yeah.
failed. You failed
Yeah.
again. You're failing again. And,
Yeah, I don't think people understand that the brain is different. Can you talk a little bit about the science of the brain in
yes.
people suffering from obesity and how it's different?
Well, and again, and we like to use the terminology now too, people living with
Right.
obesity, thriving with
Right.
obesity, right? Because if we also say people like suffer with obesity or
Thank you
suffer
for
with diabetes,
correcting
makes them
me.
seem
You're
like,
right.
makes it seem like that they're, not everybody has to be suffering, like,
Good point.
and that's the thing, is we have a disease and it's bothering us. Certainly it might be adding to other diseases that we have, like sleep apnea, fatty liver disease, other problems, but we should also all try to be, thriving the best we can at all
Yep.
times, right? Ideally. And so, yeah, what you're talking about is that, what we've recognized over the past 20 years is that our brain really controls our metabolism and our body weight. And we don't really fully understand, you know, why for some people it controls it abnormally, meaning they develop excess dysfunctional. That's what the definition of obesity is. If you look up the definition of obesity, it's the accumulation of dysfunctional adiposity. This excess body fat has become dysfunctional in its accumulation. It's not normal. It's like, like growing a tumor if you have cancer, right? It's not normal. You didn't want your body to do it, but for some reason it's doing it. And this is all regulated via the brain, or partly regulated via the brain and its relationship with our gut, with our intestines. So that connection between the two is really what drives that body weight regulation. and to think that we can control that, because this is part of our brain called the hypothalamus, where we don't control our
Right.
hypothalamus. It's like our rat brain,
Yeah.
we call it, right? Like it's like the type you can't just,
It's
not
our
your
little
frontal lobe, which
reptilian
is something
brain.
you
It's
can,
been there for, yeah,
yeah,
our ancient.
and for purposely the right
Yeah.
reason, right? Because, the thing is that we are engineered as humans, whoever you believe created us. We're engineered as bodies to gain weight at all costs, because the being who created it, the thing that created us, right? Um, was like, we don't want them to die in the wilderness. We have to make it so that at all costs they gain weight, right? And they don't lose weight, right? And so you're fighting against Mother
Yeah.
Nature. And Mother Nature's a formidable
Yeah.
foe. Like, you don't mess with Mother
Yeah.
Nature,
Weight loss is
right?
abnormal, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's abnormal. And so people come in all the time and say, I want to be normal. Well, no, you really want to be abnormal, because like what you're trying to do is something that your body doesn't want to do. And that's hard. It's like, being female and stopping our period, or we don't have control over
Right.
that. The same thing, right? Our hypothalamus controls our reproductive capacity. Whether how we blink our eyes or hold your breath, right? You can't hold your breath. You can hold your breath for a period of time. People can train themselves to hold their breath even longer. There's some people that can hold their breath,
Minutes.
like some ungodly
Yeah.
amount of time, right? But eventually they have to breathe, because their body. So some people can, again, train themselves well enough that they can get their body weight down and they can really do it. But they're like another level of person, like the person who can hold their breath for 8 minutes, while they do some sort of dive, maneuver, right, in the water, or the synchronized swimmers, or whoever, those people are that are training themselves, right, to override that brain thing, right? So it is it's and the other thing we have to recognize about the disease of obesity, it's extremely heterogeneous. Sorry, I trying to think of the word, right? Extremely heterogeneous, and that we completely think it's all one
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? Like, we treat it as one
Mm-hmm.
condition. Like, we wouldn't give all cancers the same chemotherapy.
Mm-mm.
I mean, initially we probably did, because we probably only had one chemotherapy or something, right, when we
Yeah.
first developed
Yeah.
chemotherapy, and then we gave it to all. Then we recognized, this doesn't work very well for pancreatic cancer. We got to come up with something new for that one, because it works differently, right? And this is the same way about obesity. People think obesity is just one problem, when really it's very heterogeneous, and the response to treatment is heterogeneous. For one person, they can lose 100 pounds with a diet and exercise program, and the next person nothing, right? So we have to really be mindful of that and recognize that, and we have to recognize that in ourselves as humans, to not compare ourselves to other people, because we tend to do that, right? But we wouldn't expect, for example, if we were both getting the same treatment, same chemotherapy, and one of us had pancreatic cancer, the other one had prostate cancer, we wouldn't expect the same result necessarily, like the same outcome. And so we have to really think about it with more diversity than we're thinking about it
Mm-hmm.
today. And that's where the future is going, in terms of figuring out, why some people are responders to treatment, different treatments, right? And why others are not, and how can we optimize
Right.
that to
Right.
optimize care
Well,
delivery.
even with some of the newer medications, right? With the GLP-1s, which I'm sure the audience, the listeners are just hoping we get to that topic, but not everybody has the same results with those drugs. Some people don't have the same
Correct.
weight loss.
Exactly. And they have to also be careful not to compare themselves, right? Because there is this sort of, especially now that they've become much more, mainstream, right? There's been much more knowledge about them. And by the way, we had them right as we got out of residency, which was 20
Yeah.
years ago.
5 years ago,
So
you mean?
we'll go
Yes.
ahead and,
No, I remember when I was
but
in medical school singing in a lecture about the promise of this new class of drugs and research being done. And I remember all of us thinking, oh my gosh, that could like completely change the game of diabetes.
it took 20
It took
years
20
really for
years.
it to really, for it to really, really, I mean, granted, we've been using these medications over that period of time, but they've just gotten so much better, especially over the past 10 years, with semaglutide, which is also known as Ozempic for diabetes, and Wegovy for weight management, or obesity treatment. And so again, that molecule really, was so much more effective than the older GLP-1 medication. So we've just gotten, this is what science does, is it iterates on itself, right? And makes better and better treatments, and so it's not unusual that this should happen. But But it's really, really, really changing the face of a lot of healthcare at the moment.
I saw on somebody shared on Twitter, or I think it's called X now, but
It is.
someone
I still call it Twitter.
I call it Twitter X.
Kind of like the bird. I like the bird better
I
than
do too. I feel like I need to go.
maybe
This
that's what
is
it should
going to
be.
be the
We should call
cover
it,
of
maybe
our
just put a
podcast. It's
symbol.
going to be you and I doing so. But it was a sign.
It'll be like Prince. It'll just have a sign
It'll
instead
just
of a
be a
name.
sign. You and I will just be a symbol one day. So, can we talk a little bit about the mainstream use of these medications? Someone shared with me on Twitter or X this morning. There was, I don't even know, call it not a post, a tweet. And it said something about how they went to one of the online, one of the commercials that they saw on TV for weight loss, and they got a compounded drug and it made them sick and it was awful. Now, is it the compounded drug that made them sick? Most likely it's the fact that they just got a prescription for a medication that should never be just given without the appropriate medical guidance and follow up. Just where I lose sleep over this stuff. So if I'm losing sleep over it, I know you are. What is the state of this, not just compounding, but just mass exposure of these medications to everyone? Because as a healthcare provider, it's scary to me because these are injectable medications that we're not playing. I was telling someone, my husband just started an anti-cholesterol medication. And he got more counseling and more time and lab tests for taking Zocor than somebody would if they were to get an injectable GLP-1. It's crazy.
Right. And that's what we're fearful of, right? At the Obesity Medicine Association, for which I was president last year, I'm the past president this year. We wrote a statement on this. We have that published, in Obesity Pillars, which is, and we have some patient information on our website. But the real concern is that these compounded drugs they're not directly, approved and regulated by the FDA. And we created the Food and Drug Administration for a reason in our country, which was to keep our drugs
Mm-hmm.
safe as we could eventually keep them. You have companies, so Novo Nordisk produces semaglutide, which is, like we said, is Ozempic and Wegovy, and Eli Lilly produces tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro and Zepbound now. Um, they are the only two companies that are FDA approved to make that active pharmaceutical ingredient. So they are the only companies that can produce that chemical, right? That researched it, that produced a chemical. They produce it the same way every day in their factory with the same process, right? That they took that process, this. So I'm a chemical engineer by undergraduate training, and I worked for a major company, Procter and Gamble, for a while. So there's a process we go through, right? You develop a process, you develop a molecule, you develop the process around it. You keep that process a little bit secret, meaning it's called intellectual property. The process itself typically can't be patented. The molecule is patented, but the process can't really be patented. The delivery of it is patented, but having this molecule out there, what people are doing is when the molecule becomes available, the patent is released and it says, here's what the molecule looks like. There are smart people in the world that can sort of
Mm-hmm.
re-engineer it and figure out how to
Mm-hmm.
make it, right? But they're not making the same
Right.
stuff. I mean, they're not making the same, they might not be making the same quality. They might not have the same process even. The process is different. The process, for example, that Novo Nordisk uses to make semaglutide is a living process. They use Saccharomyces and they make this protein molecule because this is a protein. It's not
Saccharomyces
like
is a yeast, by the way, for those of you that may not know what that word means. Keep going. Sorry, Angela.
yeah. So they use this biological process, right, to develop this protein because these are polypeptides. These are proteins. It's not like aspirin where you're just taking some
Right.
chemicals and mixing
Right.
them up and
Right.
pushing them together. You're making a protein molecule with amino acids. And then, they've been doing this for a long time. And we can when we prescribe it and a patient goes to get it at the pharmacy, we know they're getting something that's good and something that's been studied and researched the most recent study, the SELECT trial, which looked at cardiovascular protection of semaglutide, looked at 17,000 people over 4 years taking this molecule, right? But not taking necessarily the compounded molecule. What patients need to understand is that compounded molecule might not be the
Right.
same, might be okay, might be the same, might be okay, but I'm not sure we want to go with might be when we're talking about putting pharmaceuticals in our
Yeah.
bodies. Like, to me, I want to know, we took an oath as doctors to first do no harm. That was the oath we took, which means our first job is to not harm
Yeah.
people. Our second job is to try to make them better. And right now we're overlooking that in the United States, all in the name of
Yep.
profit and money,
Yep.
because there's a lot of people that need access to care. And that's the other thing that really bothers me about this, is that we don't have good access to care because insurance doesn't universally cover obesity treatment, even just obesity treatment without expensive drugs, just obesity
Yeah.
treatment. Insurance doesn't cover it. And yet now we're saying, well, it might be okay if you go inject this other stuff over here, and you're gonna have to pay for it, even though it's subpar.
Yeah.
Like it's like, here,
Well,
here's some random stuff, but it's not
right.
regulated. Like, it could be lead in there, could be
Yeah.
mercury in there, could be anything
Yeah.
in there, because no one is looking at that quality
Yeah.
control.
Well, there's two separate issues, though, right, Angela? There's the issue of safety and knowing that you're injecting yourself with something that's safe and effective. But then there's the concern I have, which is telehealth providers and services where you're just, hey, get an appointment with the doc and we'll prescribe this for you. And it
Exactly, that's
started
the
with
separate
drugs
problem.
like Viagra, right? Like you see ads,
Yeah,
okay,
hair
and
products,
hair
like
products
for
and things like that. How did we get to this being considered safe enough? Because these drugs have side effects. And I know,
9 people have died from compounded
wow,
semaglutide, according to the FDA
wow,
website. The FDA has is it FEARS or FAERS? It's adverse event,
okay,
FAERS website, adverse event reporting system, that people report to the FDA that they've had some sort of bad reaction to
yeah,
XYZ. And, there's been 9 people have died associated with
right,
compounded these
yeah,
compounded medications
yeah,
for weight loss. And so it is just something that people are not getting the right education around. This is a chronic disease of
right,
obesity, right? Um, and it's not a cosmetic disease. It's not something we should be, I think, playing around with, as you're suggesting. Like, we should have people. The other thing that I really worry about is people that don't get it, people that get it this way with just filling out a form and get it sent to them. Um, we have data to show that when you stop taking, if you take treatment and you lose weight, let's say you lose 20% of your weight. So you're 250 pounds and you lose 50 pounds. That's 20% of your weight. And that's the average weight loss with our newer medication,
mm-hmm,
tirzepatide. So let's say you're a good responder or an average responder to tirzepatide. You get this off the internet. You lose your 50 pounds and you're like, wow, I'm a new person. I can do this on my own. I can exercise and I can eat right and I can do this on my own. And you stop your medication. And then your weight goes back up. And weight gain is very
mm-hmm,
insidious. It happens a week, a
mm-hmm,
month, 2 months, 3 months. And now, let's say even 2 years later, you've gained back that 50 pounds. It's very easy to gain back 50 pounds in 2 years. I mean, it sounds like a
mm-hmm,
lot, but actually, it's not
mm-hmm,
that hard. You can do it easy, pretty easily. You gain back the 50 pounds. Now your obesity is harder to
right.
treat the next time when you gain that weight back. So we're going to have all
Because
these
you've
people out
reset
there.
your metabolism now. You made it that much
We
harder.
know, yeah, when you lose weight and regain it, we have data to show from the Biggest Loser studies. Kevin Hall is one of the most amazing research individuals I know at the NIH, doing all this research on our metabolism. He's the best. And he is, like, very altruistically, right? I mean, he could easily go out and start a compounding company and make a lot of money. But no, he's working at the NIH for the government, looking at how how do we, fight back against our metabolism, right? Doing God's work
Yeah.
essentially for us. And he showed that when people gain weight back, it becomes harder to lose the next time. Through that Biggest Loser, the show on
Mm.
TV, they looked at some of those contestants in terms of their weight loss and weight gain. So I do think, it's something we shouldn't Like we're playing around with our
Yeah.
metabolism. Like I said, we're poking Mother Nature. And probably 10, 20, maybe even 30% of people will be fine. And they will be fine. And it isn't a harmful treatment for them to receive treatment this way. But for the other 70% of people, I mean, that's that's a that's a big deal to me. That's too many people at risk of being hurt to
I
justify
agree.
that we should be able to deliver it this way without the correct oversight and attention to this, looking at it as a chronic
Yeah.
disease therapy.
One of the things that I learned from you early on as these medications were coming on was that, because initially it was oh my God, look at all these side effects. You get nauseous and this happens, is that every drug comes with side effects, each and every one, right? Aspirin,
Right.
Tylenol, all of it. What I understood though from you is that part of the medical training and physician oversight is to help you understand what to eat, what not to eat, the timing, how much to prevent the side effects, right? So, how, in terms
Correct.
of being able to tolerate these class of medications, how important and effective, I guess, rather, how effective is that type of oversight in making sure people can stay on these drugs for the long term?
Well, I think it's hugely effective. There was just that report that looked at, how long people stay on these treatments from one of the big insurance
Yeah, it's the Blue
companies,
Cross Blue Shield
in
or
the
one of,
country.
yeah,
And yeah, so they were looking at obviously claims data, not like talking to patients about why. So it's complicated data, meaning we don't necessarily believe it 100%, meaning a lot of times people don't get another prescription because they don't have
right.
coverage or it got denied, or so there's other reasons why they don't continue on a medication besides I just had side effects and I stopped it. So there's a lot of blame around that but one of the things they did note is when patients got it from an obesity medicine specialist, and got it under a comprehensive type of treatment plan, that they did better, that those patients were staying on drug better. And I'll tell you that from my anecdote, all my patients stay on. I mean, maybe not
Yeah.
all. I mean, it's kind of a but less than 5% of people, 10% of people go off of it because they just really can't tolerate it. And there are patients like that, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've had them, I treat them. Or there's also if patients that don't respond, so then we intentionally take them off because they're not
Right.
responding. And you don't want to have somebody on $1,000 medication that's not responding, right? I mean, so again, we have to be very attentive to this, purposefully, for all these reasons that we've talked about. And it really does make a difference when you're counseling people the right way. And patients also are so motivated. If you can imagine, someone spent I had a woman the other day, she's in her 70s, and she told me, I've been trying to do this for 50 years. This meaning control my weight or lose weight or be a healthier weight than I was before. And she's lost like, 60 pounds, right? With using this type of treatment combined with she's exercising, she's going to the gym, she's, eating protein, eating her plants, she's doing everything correctly, right? And she's like, it's just amazing to me that I haven't, it's been 50 years I've been trying to do this. And now, I finally have like hope, right? I finally have treatment that has been able to help me. And that's just remarkable, right? That when you think about that with people waiting so long for this treatment, sometimes people take it to the next level, unfortunately, meaning they think, okay, I can take more drug faster. So we've had patients actually do that and it doesn't turn out well, right? And we have to help them understand that. But if you're getting something online on the internet and you think, oh, you know what? They tell me to take, you know, zero point 0.1 cc. I think I'll take a whole
Yeah.
cc. Like, I mean, because
More is better.
more is better, right? Like bigger is better, I mean, and so patients will, I think, do this, not
Yeah.
intent, not because they intentionally want to harm themselves, but because they're like,
Yeah.
I need to lose
Yeah.
weight now. All my friends
Well,
are,
they're trying to
and
do
there's
it
this
for
urgency
years,
to
and
it.
now it's like I
And they're
can't
trying,
wait.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so in these drugs, you really have to titrate
Yeah.
up on them. And some people have to go slower than others, on the titration. They're not drugs you just start on, like a starting dose, right? I mean, they're drugs where you have to really work up because the side effect, of messing with your brain with these biochemicals, right, is that nausea, right? Or that feeling of being upset stomach. And then, like you said, that can also get worse when you just don't eat for long
Right.
periods of time. So that's the other thing that we see happen is people, because when you don't eat for a long period of time, you get ketotic, is what we call, which means you're burning fat for fuel. And when you get ketotic initially, that can make you nauseous. I mean, we see this with people that get just gastroenteritis, stomach
Hmm.
flu, right? And they come into the ER and they get a bag of fluids. They feel so much better because they're, not dehydrated anymore. They're not ketotic anymore. And, when we get those acids building up in our blood, essentially, when we're burning fat, then it makes you not feel well sometimes. So that on top of it, right? So if they're just taking the medication and being like, hey, this helps me not eat. This is great. I've been trying to not eat for 50 years.
Right.
Like, I think I just won't eat. And that's not the way we need to do
Yeah.
it. Starving is not
No.
the way we should lose
Yeah.
weight.
Maybe that's the way we end today. Starving is not the way to lose weight. Right.
It's totally true. And I think, the key is to really, really do this take care of yourself with, a real clinician, right? That's going to take care of you for the
Yeah.
long run, and I recognize there's an urgency, a lot of these programs and companies started with good intentions, meaning we recognize there wasn't enough obesity specialists in the country, just like there's not enough diabetologists, endocrinologists, to treat everyone with diabetes. So we recognize that primary care doctors are starting to learn. We're training them through the OMA how to deliver obesity care, because we really have to. These companies started out of a good place, I think, because they wanted to improve
Hmm.
access, to care, because there's 140 million people in the United States that deserve access to care, that have obesity and are eligible for treatment, and we can't just service all of those people at once. So some of these things started altruistically, but I think it's gone kind of the other way, and it's gotten a little bit out of
Yeah.
control,
A lot
unfortunately.
of out of control. Yes. So, okay. So, last question. So this is called living connected. The reason we call these conversations living connected is because fundamentally, I think, there's a lot of stuff broken in healthcare, but I'm really passionate about just the loss of human connection and connectivity specifically in
Yes.
healthcare. And so, I guess on a personal question front, we all have that one person in our life that we have a deep connection to, that has just been the common thread through our entire sort of life journey. Who is that person for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, that person for me is, I mean, I have a friend that we, met in
Oh,
college. And I think, we just had a girls' weekend. We hadn't done that for a while. And we just went to a resort and spent the weekend
oh,
pampering ourselves and doing lots of, connected activities, mindfulness activities, yoga. We did yoga in the silks, the aerial
oh,
yoga, which was
I'm out.
fascinating.
I did goat yoga once. That's about as adventurous as I can get.
So I think, she has been my person that's been with me, throughout all of my life's journeys. I mean, obviously, I have my family and
Yeah.
others too, but I meant as far as that's the first person that comes to mind um, if you would ask, like that connection for
I
me.
love that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining me. And we didn't even get through, like, I have 10 or 20 other topics that I probably would have talked about, but um, we like to keep these short. So,
Well, we can come back. We can do it again.
yes,
I'm sure, it won't be there's a lot more to come, especially in the obesity treatment space, because there's a lot of developments going on.
every
So
day.
a lot of new things
That's right.
coming out. So we will have a time where we'll look back on this and we'll be like, we did
Yeah.
what? We gave people drugs on the
Yeah. We
internet,
did
and we'll be
what?
like, oh, that was
Yeah.
bad. That was a bad.
It was a bad idea. Who thought of that?
But we'll
We'll
get
get
there,
there.
hopefully.
All right. Thanks for joining, Angela.